Hello, today is Sunday, September the 29th, 1996. My name's Earl Chess. I'm an alcoholic. I invite you to listen to the 13th Shenandoah Valley Roundup in Harrisonburg, Virginia. I thank you, and I hope you like this tape.
And before we get into the actual meeting, I love stories about animals, and I got a story I wanted to tell you before we get going. Last year I told you about the gorilla. This year I want to tell you a quick little story about a parrot. This guy got a parrot. He wanted to have a pet, something to keep him company, so he bought a parrot at a pet shop, and he took it home, and after about 2 weeks, the parrot wasn't saying anything, so he went back to the pet store, told the guy, said, "Look, this parrot is not talking. What do I do?" He says, "Well, you need to get one of those little mirrors so the parrot will look at itself and it'll start talking." So he did that, and come back 2 weeks later, the guy says, "Look, I've had that parrot for 4 weeks, got that little mirror, that parrot still is not talking." The guy says, "Well, you need to get one of those little roll-around things where the parrot will get inside, he'll roll around, get some exercise, he'll see himself in the mirror, and he'll start talking." So he does that. Comes back 2 weeks later, he says, "I had that parrot for 6 weeks. I got the little spinning thing, I got the mirror. Look here, the parrot is dead." So the guy who runs the store, he says, "You mean that parrot never said anything to you?" And the guy said, "Well, he did say one thing just before he died." The guy said, "What was that?" He said, "That parrot said, 'Do they got any bird seed in that store?'" You guys, because I told that joke at work and they looked at me like there was something wrong with me. A moment of silence. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Where's that big book? Blue book. In the house. Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And with that, we have a portion of the big book on how it works, and I've asked our newest member, Teresa, if she'll come up and share that with us this morning.
Well, my name's Teresa, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm scared to death, but God is going to lead me through this. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. But we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May ye find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. Thank you.
Okay. And we have 12 traditions that help hold our groups together, and ask Gerald if he'd come up and share those with us.
Hello, my name is Gerald and I'm an alcoholic. 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, since the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our speaker this morning comes from Silver Spring, Maryland. I got to meet him yesterday, and I know a lot of you have got a chance to meet and talk with him and are anxious to hear his story. So I'd like to introduce to you this morning Patrick.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pat, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank the committee for taking a chance on somebody they'd never known before or met before or heard of before. There's been a few people that have particularly touched me. A lot of you have made me feel so warm and comfortable down here. I want to thank you people, particularly the Canadians who come all the way down here. I was really, I've never met Canadian people before, and after meeting you people, I'm ready for them.
They ain't all like us.
I want to thank Just Jim for welcoming us when we got here. We got here about 8 o'clock Friday night, and I walked in and sat in that back corner, and I was pretty intimidated because they did this countdown. It started at 50. And most of you people stood up before I did, and I'm going, what in the hell am I going to say that can touch these people? And I realized that I'm going to talk about me and how it was and how it is. There's been a lady here by the name of Carol that I really got to enjoy. She told me some stories about herself yesterday, and it was right funny. I don't know where you are, Carol. There you are. And a gentleman from Richmond by the name of Jim M. Where's Jim? Is he here? There he is. This gentleman, I'm not going to break his anonymity, he had a serious personal tragedy earlier this week, and he came up here because he felt safe. And I was impressed with that. If I had been faced with a tragedy of that magnitude, I believe I could have hid out for days and not talk to anybody. In fact, that's usually what I do. Anyway, to the newlyweds. I'm real proud because my wife has taught me well after 16 years that I do leave the seat down when I leave the bathroom. That was an important step into perfect harmony in my household. Jim shared a story with me yesterday, and I asked permission to pass it on this morning, and I hope too many of you haven't heard this story, but it's about 3 winos living under a bridge drinking wine, and one of them died. And they called the police, and they took him to a funeral home, and the other 2 drunks thought, well, we better go pay our respects. So they went to the funeral home and paid their last respects, and then they came back under that bridge and started drinking again, and one of them looked at the other and said, he didn't look too bad, and the other one said, hell, he ain't had a drink in 2 days, he ought to look good. Did I say it right? I have to be honest, folks, I'm terribly nervous sitting up here, standing up here. I'm nervous because I'm going to do something that is inherently against my nature. I'm going to try to tell you the truth about who I am. When I first came in this program, and my date of my last drink is May 31st, 1984. When I had about 2 years in the program, I was being asked quite regularly around the neighborhood to speak at meetings for people's anniversaries, and I was incredibly funny, and people laughed a lot. And I liked that feeling. Well, the only problem was I wasn't saying a damn thing that was truthful about me. I lied a lot when I got up there. And so my kneecaps are shaking right now. I talked to Tony. I related a lot to what Tony said on Friday night. I'm a salesman. I used to do the liquor store shuffle. I'd go from one liquor store and cash a check for 20 over my purchase, and then go to the next liquor store and get 20 over, and then run to the bank and put it in there so the first check would clear. Anyway, I was born into an Irish Catholic family in 1949, and I learned at a very early age that Irish people celebrate everything with a drink. Dark, sun, happiness, tragedies. And that's how I learned to deal with every serious issue that ever came along in my life. When I was in my early teens, I was sexually abused by an older man, and I say that to you out loud in front of this crowd because for years I walked around thinking I was the only person in the world that it ever happened to. And that made me feel real different than the rest of the people in the world. It took this program and a number of years in this program to be able to admit that out loud. But because of that, I had already had serious trust issues, but that put it over the edge. I wouldn't trust another human being as long as I lived. And the best way to do that is to drink and hurt people before they can hurt you. And I got real good at that. I joined the Army in 1968, and I'm going to say some things about you folks that I'm not particularly proud of. We may get a chuckle out of it, but this is truly who I am and what I've done to be right where I am this morning. I joined the Army in 1968. I refused to drink like the rest of my family because I wasn't going to be like them. How many times have we heard that? They sent me to Turkey, and when I got to Turkey, I was on top of a mountain in a missile unit that did not exist, and I'm not going to go into it, but I signed papers that said I was never there. And it was a nuclear missile unit. And one time we loaded those guns, those weapons, those missiles, and came very close to using them. And when they told me the fallout range of those missiles, I knew I was going to be dead if we fired them. They said about 60% of you won't make it. And up until this time, the Army had been kind of a joke. You know, you run around and you play Army and you drink and you have a good time and you chase women and you be a lot of things. I had no intention of getting killed for my country. Or the thought had not crossed my mind. Let me put it that way. Well, when we came down off of that crisis we were in, I went to the Quonset hut, which passed for a bar, and I ordered an 8-ounce glass of vodka. It's the first time I ever drank like that, and you know that wasn't the last time. But something happened when I drank all that vodka. I became big inside. I became a big guy. Not a stupid big guy. I picked a fight with the smallest guy in the company. But nonetheless, I developed I was a cook. And so I had to get up every morning at 4 o'clock and prepare breakfast. Well, I happened to be the only cook in this place. And when you're the only cook and you're 1,700 miles away from another human being that speaks your language, people depend on each other quite a bit. And so it was quite interesting. I could get drunk every night, and I never made it back to the barracks awake in my head, but I always woke up at 4 o'clock because they would wake me up and they'd make sure I got up. My first enablers. This got worse, and I developed a taste for hashish over there. I developed quite a taste for beer, alcohol, and I should have known something was wrong with me then, but I didn't. I thought everybody else was drinking like that. I thought I was just being normal. I came back from Turkey in 1970, and I had decided that the gentleman that talked me into joining the Army hadn't been quite truthful with me. I didn't know I could enlist for 2 years because I'd signed up for 3 because they told me that's all I could do. And I got angry at that man, and I went AWOL. I'm not proud of this, but I did it. I went AWOL and hitchhiked across the United States. I went AWOL and went down to Blacksburg, Virginia and lived for 6 months. It's a great place to hide out. Back in 1970 it was, anyway. I hitchhiked across the United States and ended up on New Year's Eve in California at the Rose Bowl Parade. And I started selling shaved down aspirin as LSD because I was broke. And something began to tell me that maybe this isn't the way I chose to live the rest of my life. A couple days later, a bus came up, and it was for people that were going to go to a farm and pick fruit. And I thought, why not? I needed the money. And I had my first vision when I was out there looking around the flop house that passed for a place to sleep. And I saw all these 60 and 70-year-old men that had nothing left. And I realized that's where I was heading. So the next morning I went back into Los Angeles and I turned myself into the Newport Beach or something like that. I can't remember. It's not particularly important. I just did turn myself in. And they locked me up in Fort Ord, California in a stockade. I come to find out there's more drugs in the stockade than there was in California on the outside of prison. And being the go-getter that I am, I experimented with everything. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about my drugs, but folks, I'm a heroin addict also. I will say one thing about that. There was a gentleman in this stockade that could talk everybody in this room out of everything they had. And I decided I wanted to be just like him. Because I thought he was slick. And that's one thing people had never accused me of before this, is being slick. I saw that man die from an overdose of heroin, and I had my second Norman Vincent Peale image about where I was heading in my life. So I stopped doing that. And I got out of the Army and I came back to I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland is where I live. And through the 70s I had a nice job. I spent all my money on alcohol and drugs. Made real good money, I guess. $30,000 in the 70s, I guess that's good. It was to me. But I was always broke. And I was living in an unfinished basement making $30,000 a year. Something's wrong with that somewhere. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with that. But I drove a bread truck, and I decided the best thing for me to do was to get a part-time job in the evening so I could drink for free. So I became a bartender. And that's when I met this woman. And for those of you that heard her yesterday, I don't need to talk about it. I figured any woman that could walk up in a redneck bar and tip the bartender had to have some smarts about her, so I decided I was going to ask her out, and I did. And after my first date, I knew I was going to marry this woman. Now, she had her story about why that was going to happen. My reasoning was, and after listening to her yesterday, I'm having to rethink everything. But my feeling was that she liked me just the way I was. And I was sure that's what it was, that I liked this woman because she didn't want to change anything about me. You know, I don't understand, but when I went to the bars down in Washington, D.C. when I was single, nobody ever understood when I told them I was a brain surgeon. Needless to say, I didn't meet too many women. I married this woman in 1982. 81? You must understand, I spent a lot of my time in a blackout back then. One of the first things that impressed me about this woman is we started comparing salaries in this bar. And when I told her what I made, and I was right proud of that, I think I made $28,000 that year I met her. And she said, "Oh, is that all?" And I knew I'd met the woman I wanted. Well, she did, everything that she said yesterday, by the way, is true. She has waited 12 years for me to say that she's right. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about this morning is I started selling life insurance. And I don't know how many of you people have sold life insurance or been in the insurance business, but a lot of people come into this business, they sell everybody in their families and their brother-in-laws and everybody, and then they can't sell no more. That was me. I sold everybody I knew, and I was number 2, number 3 in the company out of a branch of about 25 salesmen. And they started telling me, "Come on, Pat, you can do better. You can be number 1. Well, I believed them. And I kept trying to be number 1. The only problem was nobody was buying life insurance from me. So I started going to this bar where I could console myself. And I started to drink a little bit heavier, a little bit more, because I couldn't do what everybody was telling me I could be. I couldn't be number 1 where my head was at. I couldn't be number 2. But I wanted to believe in them because they believed in me. I didn't believe in myself. Well, a funny thing started happening. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd wake up with the shakes. And I was convinced it was from the pressure of the job. I today know it was from alcohol. All right? And most of you heard my wife yesterday. I will touch on it briefly. I called my family physician up and he prescribed a wonderful medication for a person like me. It was Ativan. And I went and got the prescription at 9 o'clock in the morning and it said, "Do not drink when on this medication." And I thought, what the hell do these people know? And I took 2 pills and I started drinking beer. And for the first time in weeks, I relaxed. And I said, if 2 will do that and a couple beers, then 2 more will do better. I had no intention of trying to kill myself. I had no intention of doing anything adverse to myself. I was just trying to feel a little bit better about who I was and comfortable with who I am. And this medication helped. Well, as my wife pointed out yesterday so eloquently, she counted the pills and I had consumed 20 or 30 of them and drank a case of beer and ended up at the emergency room at GW Hospital. And they decided I had tried to commit suicide. Now, once again, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just trying to feel good about who I am. And the only way I could accomplish that was either through alcohol or drugs. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like the way I acted. And when I drank, I didn't care anymore. Or it just didn't seem as important. I was in that hospital for 42 days. They took me to 2 AA meetings in that period of time. Their focus was on psychiatry, not rehabilitation. And it cost me $6,000 to find out that I didn't get along with my mother and my father. I knew that already. When I got out of this hospital, I promised my wife I wouldn't drink again. And one of the things I did do was go back to that bar where I had been drinking. And these were my friends, see. So I'd go in there and drink Coca-Colas. And one day I sat there and I thought about it, and I thought about this damn program, and I thought about this one day at a time crap. I was 32 years old, and I said to myself, Pat, if you live to be 65, that's 16,000 days you can't drink. What do you folks think I did? I went and had a drink. And again, I made another promise to my wife. I won't drink but more than once a month. Because I wanted to keep her. She's a keeper. Okay? But what I found myself doing was living for that one day a month. I was a miserable son of a bitch 29 days a month. And on that 30th day, things started getting better. When I was in that hospital, my wife did watch a movie, and I watched it in the hospital, and she watched it at home, and it was about Carol Burnett and who else? Walter Matthau, and she was a drunk, and at the end they had this blurb, if you know of anybody that may have this problem, please call. And it was the Al-Anon hotline. So they gave her a direction to go in. So when I started back to my drinking again, she had a place to start going to deal with me. And as she said yesterday, I was firmly convinced that they were telling her to leave my ass because I was a drunk, a bum, and no good. They weren't telling her that at all, I know today. They were telling her that she could still love me, she didn't have to like the alcohol. But you couldn't tell me that when I was on my downward slide into the abyss of my addiction. I started selling trucks about this time. I don't know where that came from, but I started selling trucks. And I was good at it, and it's a wonderful way to live if you're an alcoholic. You make a sale, you can go out and have lunch and get drunk and come back and do it again. Well, as I did that, my alcoholism progressed a little bit more. And it got to the point where nobody wanted to talk to me, and I couldn't understand why. It could have been the breath, I don't know. But my closing ratio went through the floor. Not the ceiling, the floor. Well, about this time I had developed this neat little trick. My wife, before she took hold of the program of Al-Anon, used to try to drink with me to slow me down. We'd get a six-pack of beer, and I'd commit to only drinking 3 beers, and she'd drink 3. And she'd take all damn night to drink those 3 beers. And I'd be sitting there antsy going, what is wrong? But I wasn't going to let her know that that wasn't okay. So what I would do was wait until she fell asleep, and I drove to a liquor store. It was open until 2 o'clock in Prince George's County called TikTok. And I would drive over there. They really never closed at 2 o'clock. It was more like 1:30. But there was a whole group of us that were always in there every night at 1:30. And I never understood this until much later. But I'd go get my 6-pack of beer so I could go back to sleep, because frankly I couldn't sleep without a certain level of alcohol in my system. If it got below that level, I'd get antsy and wake up and need a drink. And I always woke up about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd make that run to TikTok. And I was driving, as I said, I was selling trucks, so I had this K-Blazer, full-size K-Blazer as a demo. And I'd get in that thing driving to TikTok, I'd crank that stereo up, and I'd be riding down the road. And every morning my wife would wait about 20 minutes into the ride to the subway station and say, you went out again last night, didn't you? And I never understood how she figured this out. It took her, 3 years after I got in the program, she told me that when I went to TikTok and got my beer, I'd crank that stereo all the way up. And the next morning I'd take her to the subway, I'd turn the motor on, stereo would blare, I'd immediately turn it down and not think nothing of it. Well, she's slick. She'd wait a few minutes until I was gone out of there, and then she'd say, "You were out again last night, weren't you?" And I never understood that. One of the other things that Al and I did teach my wife, two things. One is when your boss calls looking for you, hand the phone to the drunk. And she did. See, I really manipulated my wife, I thought, very well. I was totally outclassed by this woman as far as manipulation goes. However, the company would call, and I'd say, "Mary, take the phone, please." And she'd always, "He's not feeling well this morning." Click. Well, she'd been to a meeting the night before, and they said, "Don't do it no more." And the boss called, "Mary, take the phone. It's for you." That was scary, trying to explain to your boss that you don't have a voice, and you're "I don't have my voice this morning, I don't feel good." And I ain't smart enough to realize I'm talking out loud to the man. The other thing that they taught her to do, or her first sponsor taught her to do, and that woman still terrifies me, as she said. She intimidates me. She has all the power in the world. She walks in and I start trembling. And I don't know what it is. She taught my wife to leave me on the floor when I pass out. You see, up until that time, I thought I was doing fine because the truck was always between the white lines in the parking lot. I was in my pajamas and clean. When she stopped doing that, I'd wake up in my vomit, my piss. And something happened when that happened. I began to realize that something I was doing was not working. I didn't do anything right away, but I started thinking about it. I knew my wife was going to leave me, or I thought she was going to leave me. And this is the most kindest woman I had ever known. She didn't want nothing from me. I mean that. Yeah, but you're laughing. I say, I really mean that. You believe me, don't you? I realized I didn't want to lose her because she made me feel good a lot of the times about who I am. And I said to her, "You're going to leave me, I know it." And she said, "If I'm going to leave you, I'll let you know. I won't leave without telling you." Well, you know, driving down here, I got to share this. Driving down here, a lot of you folks are married or have been married, and we got on Skyline Drive driving down here, and we had about a 3-hour ride coming down Skyline Drive. And I said to my wife, "Isn't this wonderful?" And she said one word. She went, "Yeah." And in that, she said 48 different words. No, it's not going to be fun for 3 hours driving down here. It's okay now, but look out because it's not going to be. Well, that's the way it was in my life back then. My wife said a lot of things without saying them. And I knew she was going to leave me, and I didn't want her to leave me. So, in all honesty, I came into this program via Al-Anon because it was her going to Al-Anon that got me in this program. I didn't want to lose her. I really didn't think I had that bad of a problem with alcohol, but I'll appease her and go to AA. I turned myself into a detox, And I told him I'd already been through some psychiatric hospital, and I thought I could probably do this rehab in about a week or two. And that didn't happen. See, when I got to rehab, I didn't know how to surrender. They made me walk around with a white flag and wave it all the time. True. They made me talk about who I am. One of the times they put me up in front of a mirror and they said, say 10 things nice about yourself. And I got to 2 and started crying because I couldn't think of anything else. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs when you can't think of some nice things to say about yourself, to yourself. Not to anybody else, to yourself. So I started listening to these people, and this 28-day program lasted only 42 days for me. When I got out of rehab, now maybe some of you people can identify with this, I thought I was done. I had finished my work in AA because I had gone to rehab. I'm not drinking. It didn't work that way. One of the first things I did when I got out of rehab was quit selling trucks because there was this little dichotomy about honesty, and I couldn't sell being honest anymore, or being honest, because I'd never sold honestly in my life. I'm the kind of salesman that would stand up to you and tell you anything you needed to hear to buy my truck. If the truck needed to go 87 miles on a gallon, then by God it went 87 miles on a gallon. I'm not proud of that. Today I am still a salesman, and I've learned that I can sell very well being honest and fair with people. And that AA has taught me. A couple of things have happened to me in recovery. For the first 2 years, I went to maybe 2 meetings a week because that's all I could seem to fit into my schedule. That's a joke. No, I guess not. I went down to a meeting in Washington, D.C., and this was a very powerful, predominantly black meeting. And I heard this woman of about 25 years in the program bare her soul in all honesty about her life and how terrible and the tragedies she'd been through, most of them in recovery. And I walked up to this woman after the meeting, and I think I had about 1.5 years in, and I said, ma'am, I sure would like to have what you got. And she looked me up and down and said, honey, you couldn't handle it. She was right. If I had tried to deal with some of the things she had dealt with when I had 1.5 years in this program, I'd be drunk. I don't doubt it today, but you couldn't tell me that, and I was really angry at this woman for several years after that. There are a couple of steps in my program that have had particular meaning, and hopefully you'll find them as humorous as I now think they are. When I got to the 8th step, I had a terrible time with it. See, when my wife and I were living down in Washington, D.C., my aunt lived the next high-rise over. And she invited me over one day without my wife, and I thought she was going to give me some money or something. She invited me over, and she sat down with me, and she proceeded to tell me what a complete and utter ass I've been my entire life. And she didn't say it in those kind of words. She was very nasty and rude to me, and she said a lot of mean and spiteful things to me. And when I tried to reconcile that several months later when I was looking at the 8th step in this program, I said, there ain't no way in hell I'm putting this woman on my list. I ain't going to give her another opportunity to do it again. So I didn't put her on my list. And all I did was think about her. And I'd go to 8-step meetings, and I'd hear other people deal with it, and I finally heard the solution. I could write her a letter. There was only one problem with that. The woman didn't die, and I became nuttier than a fruitcake. Thinking about, obsessing with this, because it just was in my mind she was living rent-free in my head. And it was either I was going to take a drink or I had to make an amend to this woman or become willing to make an amend. So I put her on my list 3 years later to make an amend. And one of the things I've discovered, when you put somebody on that list, you better damn well be ready for it, because an opportunity may present itself rather immediately to make that amend. So I went to the Thanksgiving dinner one year, and I was all prepared to make my amend, and she didn't show up. First time in 20 years she ain't showed up. I finally got an opportunity 6 months later to make an amends to this woman. Now, this woman had been living up here, affecting everything I do in my life. And when I made my amends to her, she said, "What? I don't even remember that." And I couldn't understand how she had let that become so minuscule in her life, and yet it become so big in mine. One of the things that had happened, my wife and I, when we got sober, I was a Catholic and she was a Catholic, and we tried Catholic church a couple times, and for whatever reason, I don't believe I need a priest today to talk to God. I just, in the front seat of my car, I can talk to him anytime I want. I don't feel the necessity to stand in a church on Sunday mornings anymore. However, as my wife indicated, when I got sober, she blessed me with a child, a young son, a boy. And for his benefit, we thought we'd better go back to some form of religion for him. And we picked this church up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is a unity church, which meant to me that it didn't matter what denomination of religion you had, you could still come to this church and celebrate. And we all three of us would ride in the car up there on Sunday mornings and feel good about ourselves and leave. And we got out of this place one Sunday morning, and all of us start yapping like this, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was so self-centered at that time that it really irritated me that my son had a chance to talk before me, because he was interfering with my communication with my wife. I wanted her to listen to me, not him, me. I got real angry at my son, and I yelled at him at the top of my lungs to shut up. Not a very bright thing to do, I now know. I don't remember how old he was, maybe 7. See, my father had done that to me when I was a little boy, and to this day I still feel that pain. I've never forgotten it. And one of the things this program has taught me to do is making a direct amend. And I stopped the car on the busiest highway in Washington, D.C., pulled over on the shoulder, and I jumped into the back seat of that car. And I told my son that as an alcoholic, I sometimes forget that I'm the adult here, and I terribly apologize to you, and I hope you can forgive me. He doesn't remember this anymore, and I still carry the pain 40 years later when my father did that to me. That's a difference that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. I have a wonderful program, a spiritual program that has been given to me by you people. I want to tell you guys, you have made me feel so warm here today. This weekend, I don't know a single one of you, but I know most of you in a very special way. When my son was 6, I went to an Orioles game, as my wife talked about. And that's about 45 miles from my home. I went up there and I yelled because the Orioles at this particular time weren't doing real well, and they got a hit, and I yelled at the top of my lungs. And when I did that, my lung burst. I didn't know that it was my lung burst. I thought I was 42 years old at the time and having a heart attack because it was right here. I'm going, oh my God, I'm dying. I'm 42 years old. I got a son that I love tremendously, a wife that I love, and I'm never going to see either one of them again because they weren't with me. I was with a bunch of sober guys. And I started crying and feeling sorry for myself because I thought this was it. And I discovered one thing, several things over this period of time, but one thing I discovered: when you're in a wheelchair, nobody will look at you. They wheeled me out of this stadium in a wheelchair, and I kept looking at people to see if they'd look at me, and nobody would look at me. And I thought, damn, ain't nothing wrong with me. I might be having a heart attack, but I'm still a pretty good guy. And nobody would look at me. They rushed me to the closest hospital in Baltimore, which was Union Memorial Hospital. And I knew I was dying because this priest came running over from the baseball club and said, are you the guy that we've just brought over from the stadium? And I said, yes, Father, I am. And he gave me my last rites. So I started crying again. They told me in the emergency room that I had a collapsed lung and it would be back. They'd inflate it and I'd be out of there in 3 days. That didn't happen. And I had a tube sticking out of here and a tube sticking out of here, and my lung would not reinflate. The reason it would not reinflate is it had burst from yelling. I got a big mouth, in case you folks haven't figured that out. 3 weeks into my stay, they gave me an operation to sew my lung back together again, and they told me, they lied to me and said it wouldn't hurt. When I got out of that surgery, I had friends that had driven up to sit in the waiting room because they were afraid I might do something stupid like die. Program friends. When they put me in the recovery room, I tried saying the Serenity Prayer over and over and over again to cover the pain that I was feeling. I mean, it was real pain, not just pain up here. And I never could get through the Serenity Prayer. Never. And that didn't stop me from trying. And this woman, this aunt, by the way, who I had made amends to, called me and said, offer the pain up to God, which is what I did. I quit whining about it and shut up and offered the pain up to God. 3 weeks later, I was still in that hospital, and the operation had not been successful. So they told me they were going to have to do it again, and it won't hurt. And I said, you son of a gun, you lied to me. Several things happened when I was in this hospital that is tantamount in my recovery. One was, I'm the type of alcoholic that sounds good in a meeting. I mean, you know the type, you sound good in a meeting. Well, that's me. I sound good in a meeting, but it's hell practicing these principles in all of my affairs. And this gentleman drove up to visit me, and he said, Pat, it's time to practice that living room sobriety. And I didn't like hearing that, because that meant I had to practice this program at home, in the hospital, wherever I was. And I really like feeling sorry for myself and whining. I was 45 miles away from home, and my wife has already told you she drove up every day to visit me. She brought my son up, and the nurses let him bring him in and sit on my stomach or on my bed with me. And I felt real blessed. The icing on the cake, however, I was 45 miles away from home, and somebody from my home group in Wheaton, Maryland drove every day for for 42 days to sit with me. Folks, I've never experienced love like that in my life. I never felt worthy of it. I never understood it. When people put their hands out to me before I got in this program, they wanted something. And nobody wanted anything from me, and I couldn't understand that. The people in my home group taught me what love means. And folks, I just love to give it back to this day. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I don't put my hand out as often as I used to. But I try to be the best father, the best husband. And it took me 8 years in this program, folks, to realize that my wife doesn't have a mean bone in her body. You see, part of my problem has always been trusting people. You know, I was sexually abused and I couldn't let anybody get close to me. And I've been married to this woman for 6 years and I still didn't trust her. I didn't trust anybody. And I finally realized that she's not here to hurt me. She's not here to take anything away from me. She's here to be my friend. And that's pretty powerful. Folks, I don't know what else to say this evening, this morning. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you very much.
Patrick, they got a little gift here for you on behalf of the committee. Thank you very much for that, man.
I don't know about you all, but I got a few tears in my eyes there a couple of times. I want to thank all of you for showing up. Jim said you come for him, but I don't believe that for a minute. I think y'all here for me. So I'm gonna leave you with another little alcoholic thing. This old man and woman were driving down the interstate together, and he had his speed control set on 75 miles an hour, and there was 65 mile an hour speed limit. And the cop pulled him over and he says, "Hey fella," says, "you know you're speeding?" He said, "How could I have been doing that?" I said, "I had it set on 65. His wife says, "You're lying, you're lying." I said, "Shut up, woman, shut up." So by the way, he said, "You got a ball front tire on this car." "Well, officer, I don't understand that. I just had it inspected last week." She said, "Yes, and you told him that you'd put a new one on tomorrow." I said, "Shut up. You're getting in trouble." The officer stuck his head in the window and said, "Does he always talk to you this way?" She said, "No, not really." He said, "Only when he's been drinking." I want you to know I love every one of you. I don't expect to want anything from you. And this has been a gift. I didn't know what love was either, Patrick, when I got here. I thought it was a gathering in the head that come out the tail. And that's what happened to me and my wife for a long time. I don't know if we ever fell in love. We sure fell in heat a whole lot. You know, when we got married, she wanted 2 children, I wanted 4, so we wound up with 6, so we But really, I love every one of you, and that's not, that's real. And only by the grace of God did I learn to do that. Accepting you for the way you are without trying to change you and make you to suit me. It was a long time before I learned how to love you for being the person you are. And sometimes I find that a little hard, but yet very necessary. To love the person, but not agreeing with what they're doing with their life. I've seen some tragic things happen, and they've touched me very dearly. I was told not long ago I should stick with the winners and learn from the losers. And believe me, I learned a lot from the losers. I had my first sponsor to live and die this program. A lot of you knew him. Ed had a heart attack in Blackstone, died in Farmville Hospital, never got home. And I had trouble talking about it. Every meeting I went to, I knew where he was sitting. And a lady in Harrisonburg came to me one night and said, "You talking about Ed?" And I said, "No, I tried not to think about him." She said, "You better start talking about him." So I talked and I cried and I talked and I cried. Finally able to let go. Some of you are probably sitting in here today when my second sponsor, Henry, died. And I replaced him on this committee. And at Orkney Springs, I was allowed to close the meeting, and I just cried. And my Mike remembers it. I spent more time crying than anything else. I've had some people to touch me in a very special way. Some of them are here this weekend. God bless every one of you and come back and see us. We have a nice way of closing.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and